Hey guys, and welcome back to I Like Watches. Now, some of you do need to brace yourselves because I'm going to be using a very offensive word throughout the course of this review. It begins with the letter Q and it is, of course, quartz. Now, before you disappear off, click that homepage button and watch somebody else review a different watch. Please, just give me a couple of minutes to explain to you why the quartz movement inside this vintage Seiko mechanical quartz watch actually has a lot more in common with a modern mechanical watch than it does a modern quartz watch. Now, I've visited Andy from the vintage Japanese watch company a few times in the last few months, and I gotta say, he has converted me into a huge fan of vintage quartz watches because, well, when they were first introduced onto the market, they cost an absolute fortune. And because it was new technology and they were very expensive, Seiko made them unbelievably well. The engineering and precision that went into making the mechanical quartz movements inside these vintage Seiko's is unbelievable, and I have totally and utterly fallen in love with what is probably my cheapest Seiko watch. It's incredible. So please guys, stick around for the review of this beautiful little watch, and I think at the end of this video you might be converted into a bit of a vintage Seiko mechanical quartz fan. And here it is, my beautiful vintage Seiko quartz QR. Just look at it. I absolutely love this thing. Right, this is a review of this watch, but before I go into the usual facts, figures, stats and specifications, the things I like, the things I'm not so keen on, I want to talk about two things in order to help me keep your attention. Firstly, price. I paid £185 for this almost 50-year-old watch that's in incredible condition. And that staggers me. I can't believe watches like this with this sort of heritage and history are available for those sums of money. This has to be the cheapest Seiko I've ever bought, and it's probably, when it was new, the most expensive Seiko I've ever bought. This thing was 4 times the price of your luxury automatic watches when it was released onto the market. The second thing I want to talk about is the movement, because I think if there's one thing that's going to turn off a lot of people, it's the fact that it says quartz on the dial. But like I said in the introduction, it's not like a traditional modern quartz. A lot of us are turned off by quartz watches because we picture these fashion watches with these $1 or $2 super cheap quartz movements in them. Trust me, this is not one of those watches. It does have some similarities to modern quartz watches. Yes, it has a battery. The battery powers a quartz crystal and it's controlled by a circuit board, and the second hand does tick once every second. But in the introduction I said this has a lot more in common with a modern mechanical watch than it does with a modern quartz watch. So let me tell you why I think that's true. The movement inside this watch is built on an all metal main plate, just like a modern automatic watch. It's fully jeweled. You will not find any plastic parts or components inside this watch. It's fully metal. Metal cogs, metal parts. It's fully serviceable. If you've got a problem with this watch, you can have it fixed, and the parts are readily available. Because it's a fully jeweled movement, it needs oil for it to be lubricated. Modern quartz watches don't have any jewels, they don't need any lubrication, they're not serviceable. Cheap quartz movements basically thrown away if there's a problem with them. And I think one of the biggest turn-offs with modern quartz watches is the second hand not hitting the markers. Now, you don't have that problem with this watch because Seiko put a lot of time and effort into designing the movement inside this watch, and the second hand is indexed, which means it has a jeweled indexed finger that sits in the seconds gear. What does that mean? It means that second hand will hit every single second marker, no matter what angle or position you are holding this watch. Look at it, bang on, almost 50 years old, and it's, it's like it was new. I hope that goes some way towards explaining why I think these vintage quartz watches are worth considering and why you should stick around for the rest of this review. Right, let's have a look at the facts, figures, stats and specifications, shall we? Right, this watch is 37mm in diameter. It's 13.6mm thick. That's not including this little bubble-backed sort of battery compartment. That doesn't cause any discomfort. I'll talk about that later in the video. The length of the watch is 43.4mm. Lug width is 18mm. This is the original bracelet that this watch would have been supplied on. It's 19.5mm at the case, and it tapers down to just over 15.5mm. This is also the original clasp, 17.1mm. Fully stainless steel construction, stainless steel bracelet, case, crown, bezel, case back, clasp. It's all stainless steel. Most of the components inside are, like I've said, metal or stainless steel. There's a decent amount of weight to this watch. In fact, it weighs, set up for my 7¼ inch-ish wrist, 97 grams. Nice. And the crystal is not sapphire on this watch. They did actually release some of these watches with sapphire crystal and AR coating. Now, they were the more expensive models, and it feels weird to say that because this watch cost 4 times the price of, you know, your really nice, luxurious, expensive automatic Omegas and things like that. But this wasn't actually considered their expensive quartz watch. They had a number of models that cost more than this. They actually have the same movement inside, but they were just adjusted to be more accurate. The next one up cost roughly the same as a car, and then the most luxurious and most expensive watch in this range cost the same as an apartment. And I think those watches may have come with sapphire. You'd want sapphire crystal, wouldn't you, if you were spending the money that you would have spent on an apartment, but on a watch. Let's have a look at the finishing then. I have refinished this to some degree. There was a few light scratches and hazing on this watch when I picked it up. I've literally just run a Cape Cod cloth over the whole watch, although I was doing that for about 2 hours. It's done a really nice job, actually. The watch has come up really, really nicely. There is an argument to be had that, you know, a 50-year-old watch, you should leave all the wear and tear on it. But yeah, I wanted to really show this in fantastic condition when you're showing watches in a light box like this with a nice HD camera. Scratches and marks and stuff don't look particularly good. They really are emphasized, and it can make the watches look really, really nasty. So yeah, I did run a Cape Cod cloth over this, but yeah, it's looking really, really nice. You can pick up new and unworn versions, or new old stock, I believe it's called, of these watches. They are few and far between, and you will pay a premium for them, but generally they will just come with a little bit of light wear and tear. They're coming from Japan, and they're usually coming in very, very good condition. So it's fully polished all the way around. It is stainless steel. This is not a plated case. Like I said, I have refinished this watch. Stainless steel bracelet again, just run a Cape Cod cloth over it. Yeah, nice. Obviously lots of jingle jangle, but that's the style, and the tolerances when it came to things like bracelets and clasps back in the day were not quite what they are now, but it's very, very comfortable actually. The clasp, it is a pressed clasp. I think the most expensive watches in the world back then had pressed clasps. That was the norm. Fully milled clasps came in, well, far more recently. You've got what, five micro adjusts there, and they are push pins. So looking at the back of the watch, you can see it's got solid end links. They are not hollow end links, and you can see that number on the back of the watch. The 452184 means it was made in 1974, the 5th month, so this would have been May, and this is watch number 2184 in that particular month. Now that battery compartment does stick out a little bit, but unbelievably, you just don't feel it. I was fully expecting to feel that and for it to be a little bit of an irritant on the top of my wrist, but not at all. And if anything, it actually helps just slightly to angle the watch head or face towards your head to help you read the time. Weirdly, yeah, I'm surprised myself that you just don't feel that fairly substantial battery bump in the back of the case, but honestly you really, really don't. Right, in terms of adjusting this watch, it's fairly standard. You pull the crown out to the first position to adjust the date and the day, and then to the second position to adjust the time, and it hacks as well, look. Now look at this crystal. This is one of my favourite features of this watch. Funnily enough, I've reviewed a new dive watch recently. It was over 17mm thick, and I was just saying for the size of the watch that is ridiculous, and I do think that is ridiculous. But for some reason these vintage quartz or vintage watches just seem to carry that height so much better. Well, it's the style, isn't it? And that crystal is just incredible, and it's immaculate as well. There's not a scratch on this crystal. Look at it, absolutely impeccable. Right, let's talk about some pros and some cons. And there are some cons to buying this watch, believe it or not, but let's talk about the pros first. I've already mentioned a few. The price, $185. I think this just represents unbelievable value for money, especially when you consider the price of this watch when it was new. It was very expensive. The movement, it's got to be a pro. Yes, it's a quartz movement, but it's a mechanical quartz movement, and it's built impeccably well. It's built like a tank, that's what Andy keeps telling me. And quartz movements are very low torque, and because it's fully jeweled, basically that means very little if no wear and tear after 50 years. These watches, if they're maintained, maybe serviced every 10 years or so, will run forever. And the other one I've already mentioned is the fact that that second hand hits the markers very consistently, which is excellent. Right, but there are other pros. It's a quartz, which means, well, you don't have to keep setting it every few days if you don't wear it. You can just pick it up and go, and every watch collection needs a quartz. It's accurate. This thing will run to plus minus 2 minutes a year. Not a month, not a week, not a day, a year. After 50 years, 2 minutes a year. The build quality really is impressive. It's amongst the best I've ever seen, and the movement inside, Andy's gone through it with me. He's shown me movement parts. They are built incredibly well. The looks, just look at it. It's an awesome watch to look at. This is going to spark a conversation at a watch meet, or if you're out and about, 100%. And I think you're going to enjoy telling people what I'm telling you guys, and that is vintage quartz watches are not like modern quartz watches. I think it's an interesting story and something that not everyone knows. And I think one of the main pros of this particular watch is it's one of the first, if not the first ever, full production quartz watch, which means it's got history. It's got heritage. It means something. There's lots of material online about this particular watch and the watches made in this production run. I also think this watch is going to go up in value. I think these are undervalued at the moment. People don't know the true value in these mechanical quartz watches. Most people want the vintage mechanical automatic watches, but they are getting harder and harder to find, whereas these are still readily available at incredibly cheap prices. So my recommendation is to pick one up now before the prices start to rise. And of course, if you are interested in buying one of these as an investment, you've got that peace of mind that it is serviceable. It's basically been over-engineered. Seiko didn't really understand at the time that quartz movements were such low torque, didn't need jewels. Modern quartz movements don't have jewels because they just don't need them. And so these movements were built really way beyond spec, and that's why 50 years later you're seeing no wear and tear on the movements inside these watches. Phenomenal. So I've made it sound pretty sweet, haven't I? But there are some cons. The first one being, well, it's quartz, and that is just still going to put some people off. It's a shame, but it is. The fact that it is a quartz is a pro, but it is also a con to some people, sadly. Another con is that you will struggle to find these watches with very little wear and tear. Of course, they're going to turn up with some scratches, some signs of use, and they're also going to turn up with no packaging quite often. So, and it's also not easy to find, let's say, a particular model that you're looking for. You might struggle, so your options are limited. But really, that is it. If you're patient and you know who to chat to, and I would recommend getting in touch with Andy if you are interested in these watches. He's got a few available on his website, not many. But he can keep an eye out for specific watches if there are specific watches that you're interested in. So, although the options are limited, if you wait long enough, I'm sure you'll get the watch you want. I suspect after that there's going to be a few sensitive souls claiming this is just one big advert for vintage Japanese quartz watches, because that's what's happened in the past when I've produced content on these watches. And the truth is, I'm not selling my watch, and Andy's got about 3 watches available. So if it is an advert, it's a lot of hassle to go through to help Andy sell, well, 3 watches. The truth is, I'm really passionate about getting this message out there because I think a lot of people are misunderstanding these vintage quartz watches. They're missing a golden opportunity to pick up a watch with incredible heritage at, well, rock bottom prices. So honestly, guys, do your own homework if you need to, but I really can't recommend these enough. I absolutely love mine, and it will be one of the last watches I ever sell. Beautiful. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I do really appreciate it. As always, I'd love for you guys to comment in the comment section, and I look forward to reading all your messages. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. Take care, look after yourselves, and you'll see me again very soon.